Cube will now initiate.
Welcome to episode number 114 of the Curve the Cube podcast. This is your host, Jemmy, with a quick reminder to please go to the new Facebook page, Dreamers Become Doers, and click that like button and introduce yourself on that pinned post you'll see at the top. It ties in with my new Learning Curve segment that appears at the end of every episode now, and it's all about bringing the tips to you in a new way that allows you to engage with other listeners about the topic. So what can you learn from one another? Go to dreamersbecomedoers.com and get in your extra TLC to find out. Today's episode is another SOLOCAST, and my topic is all about being relentless. My dad calls it my bulldog effect, and I'm going to break down what it means, the do's and don'ts of being relentless, and what to do when you hear no. And also, my biggest tip for not giving up, which actually can apply to, honestly, any number of life situations. So it's actually a really good tip. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get this party started. I want everybody to put your hands up, make some noise as we welcome the fabulous Jemmy! The crowd goes wild!
Alright guys, so I'm going to start you off with my journal notes. You know I like to catch you up as I'm curving my own cube. It's only fair, right? For me to live what I actually am preaching here and not just preach it, but actually practice it. So first off, I'm starting again with the bad news. Dun, dun, dun. So here goes. I did not get approved for media credentials at Sunfest. Wah, wah, wah. And it was a complete shock, as this has only been about the fourth year in a row that I haven't been granted media credentials at Sunfest Music Festival. But one of these days, one day, I will break them down. But that's okay, because it leaves more room for me to concentrate on something else. All right, guys, here's some cool news. I caught an email from a fantastic lady you may remember from episode number 48, Diane Stuckert, who writes a wonderful series of mystery books called the Black Cat Bookshop Mysteries. Well, she actually writes it under the name Allie Brandon, so I don't want to confuse things. And she recently has been elected VP of the Florida chapter of Mystery Writers of America. It's a lot to say, so I'll just say MWA. And her email was inviting me to present podcasting to the group. How cool is that? So I'm going to talk about how they can become guests on podcasts and then be a good guest on a podcast. Right? Because, you know, being interviewed can be a skill that you develop in and of itself. So I hope to get them off to a good start. And I'm also going to talk to them about how to start their own podcast to promote their writing. So I'm so excited. It's happening June 17th. I can't wait, and I will keep you guys posted. Also, in the news, my friend Jules came over one day last week, and we worked through mainly his new podcast and recorded a bit of a prelude episode. It's going to be called Hustle All Day, and the concept is somewhat similar to this podcast, but with a different slant. See, it's all about people who have side hustles and people who've turned their side hustles into their main gigs. And those side hustles can be anything, as long as the goal is to rule more of their own lives, manage their own schedules, etc. So more details on that podcast are yet to come as we get closer to starting to release episodes. So I'm really excited, as I am about a lot of things, but I'm really excited about this one. So shout out to my boy Jules, and to all of you listeners out there, stay tuned. And speaking of other podcasts, I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys today, so bear with me. But how about an oldie but a goodie? How many of you guys, like I can see hands or something, but how many of you guys remember this other podcast I kind of started last year with some local friends called Eggheads After Hours? Well, I finally knocked out so much of my other brain-clogging to-do list items that I had enough brain space the other morning to finally think through that podcast and what to do with it. what direction to go, the format, etc. My brain was absolutely spinning, and I'm in touch with the other eggheads, and we're working on a really cool show. So if you guys are into tech, nerdy stuff, or if you want to know what's going on around Palm Beach County, or both, or neither, whatever, stay tuned for info on that. So, all of this news may be an indication the Flintstone Media Podcast Network is my next big area of focus. So not only will it have Curve the Cube, it'll also have Hustle All Day, it'll also have Eggheads After Hours. It'll be a fun collective space for you guys to go to be completely super motivated and go out and do wonderful things in your own world, lives, and communities. So stay tuned. I'm really excited about the podcast network and really, really growing it this year. And Jessica Kupferman, if you're listening, I'm sorry I haven't emailed you back, but I will because this is a thing I wanted your help with. So you will be hearing from me soon. All right. And last but not least, if you will be in the Miami area on Friday, May 5th, come down. That's this Friday, guys. Come down for the free premiere at 7:30 of the Messengers documentary. You've heard me talk about it before on, I think it was episode 110, Podfest episode. It's a documentary all about podcasters and this industry that I'm curving my own cube to break into. Some of my new friends like Danny, Chris, Katie, Glenn, and Dr. D are featured in it, and I'm so proud of them. It will be at the Manual Art Time Theater, which is 900 Southwest 1st Street in Miami. And I hope to see lots of you there. So I know I've thrown so much podcasting stuff at you. You guys thinking this is a podcast about podcasts, but it's not, I promise. And lastly, I had 2 seeds start to grow for another couple of really big ideas. And I'm just going to, I'll keep them to myself. They're 2 really cool big ideas, but as things start to develop there, I'll let you guys in on it, and it's going to be hopefully very exciting. That seems to be my word of the day, right? So anyways, I had the idea the other day that I believe I will one day look back on 2017 and find it fit to be called the year of the ramp up. And if this long list of announcements and updates is any indication, I think I will be right. Whew, this has been a lot. I'm already tired, and we are just getting started. So buckle up, people. It's time for the SOLOCAST, all about how to be relentless. Enjoy. All right, guys. So as you heard in my intro briefly, I said that my dad calls my ability to be relentless the bulldog factor. Basically, once I sink my teeth into something, I don't let go. It's been a part of my DNA since I was a very wee child, and I don't really remember being any other way. So I thought of a couple of examples, and the first is something that you may be familiar, but back in 2014, for those who are unfamiliar, I helped lead an effort to get my favorite radio show, #1 in South Florida, KVJ show, woo woo, shout out, back on the air. Well, first, the radio station that had recently acquired them started making changes to the show, so I started organizing people online. Then, once they were off the air altogether, I, along with a girl named Carla and a whole host of other fantastic people, grew an online campaign to get them back on the air. This involved constant strategizing, keeping up with fans on Facebook and Twitter in as close to real time as possible, getting news outlets to cover the story, being interviewed on television, making phone calls, sending emails, tweeting, posting, etc., etc., etc. And in the end, this was apparently the impression that Carla, the campaign, and I, made on the radio show.
Yeah, so we saw it really on social media, and it started with the Facebook page, and then it got onto the list, and then it really just kind of started to grow from there. So
yeah,
it was a combination of both those. And for me, my reaction, I was completely blown away with it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was thousands of people that were signed up on that Facebook page.
You had those 2, just powerhouses of women between Jemmy and Carla. They just were intense. And they were not going to give up. They weren't going to settle for anything less than helping us get our job back.
Not only was it just, it was very humbling to have something like that happen, which was great, but it also is a great lesson, the power that everyone has now with social media.
You're right.
That if you really have a cause like that and you're, committed to it, and really vocal on your social media, you can really, make some things happen.
Absolutely.
So that was pretty amazing.
So as you can see, I am a natural at being relentless. And it's been a real asset in curving my own cube into marketing and podcasting. For example, because I started this adventure while working full-time as a data analyst and a single mom, I only had so many hours in the day to kick off a small little project like, my own marketing company or podcast. But I wasn't going to let that get in my way. I was relentless. I would go to sleep with the baby, usually in bed between about 9 and 10 at night. Then after I would take Jordan, who you guys have heard before, to the bathroom in the middle of the night around like 1:30 or so, I would work for a few hours after that. I would then fall asleep around like 4 or 5 and be up again at 6 o'clock for the whole nother day. So I would do this every day of the week for probably did that for well over a year, but I simply had to because I knew I needed to be relentless in my pursuit. As another example, I was never too afraid to go after some really high target guests for the show, even very early on. At least I never let that fear stop me from asking anyway. I just reasoned that my potential guest was already not on my show. So the worst thing that can happen is that they continue to not be on my show. And what difference does that make, right? So I would really have nothing to lose and then decide instead to figure out how to approach people rather than worrying about whether or not I should. There's an author by the name of James Oliver Jr. He will be a guest on that brand new podcast I was telling you about. It's called Hustle All Day soon with my friend Jules. Shout out again. But he writes on a concept that hits this topic of relentlessness square in the face. And the name of his book really says it all. The more you hustle, the luckier you get. Well, essentially, he argues that the hustle is greater than luck can ever be. Here's an excerpt. It so happens that not quitting and being a persistent mother effer is hardwired in my DNA. It's just what I do. Deciding not to quit, assuming you have a product or service for which someone is willing to pay a fair price, is critical to success. As for the question of whether I would have gone down this entrepreneurial path if I knew all the obstacles I'd be up against, I think my answer is an emphatic yes. The bottom line for me is, I've had to fight for everything I've ever gotten, and I'm incredibly persistent. But I know, so that end quote, that was on page 51 to 52, end quote. So anyways, it says it right there. You can't rely on luck. You have to be relentless. You have to work hard. And the harder and harder you hustle, the luckier you get. But I know the practice of being relentless doesn't come easy for everybody. So let's talk a minute about what to do. And that first step is to decide every day that you will move forward. You know that whole saying that if you don't have a job, then finding a job is your job? Well, pursuing your passion should also be pursued as a job, at least in terms of your level of commitment. So something every day that is moving that dream forward is essential. Even if it is something as simple as a brainstorming session, do something. And make sure it is something real and productive. Don't just check your Twitter notifications and call it a day, okay? That is not what I mean. I mean, look up venues that you want to approach with your idea. Work on your website. Make phone calls. Practice your craft. Whatever. Just do something every day that gets you closer to goal. Now remember, right, even 9 to 5s, or as I really think there should be called 7 to 7s, typically have days off. So be sure to keep yourself refreshed. You don't want to burn out when you need to be ramping up. Also be in the habit of constantly thinking of new ideas, fresh ways to approach what you want to do. Think more broadly as to who maybe wants to purchase your services and new ways you can package what you do. Look at what others are doing and get those fresh ideas and spins. And more to the point, don't ever just settle for where you are. Keep reaching. Once you've built up your last idea and it's chugging along smoothly, start another project that helps build your dream. Keep going. And that is kind of exactly what I'm doing by focusing now on Hustle All Day and Eggheads After Hours, because it's not just about Curve the Cube for me. It's about a whole podcasting platform and network. So I'm constantly thinking of how do I take this to the next level? And now that Curve the Cube is chugging on along smoothly, it's time to turn my attention at least a little bit elsewhere. But being relentless not only involves what tasks you set for yourself, but also how you approach getting other people involved. So, I say this as a pretty blanket statement. Don't waste your time after you get a no. That means don't go back to the same well with the same idea and offer. Adjust the idea before you go back if you do, and it may be good to find a different person in the organization to pitch to if that's appropriate. Examine what other reasons someone may have had to say no that involve things other than the offer itself. For example, your approach, or method of communication, or how frequently you barrage them with, hey, did you forget about me? Or hey, I really want to, blah, blah, blah. You got to learn to finesse your targets and make sure that you're approaching them in a way that they will be responsive to. Sometimes the best way to learn what not to do is to take a very close, critical, and honest look at what you've been doing. So flip back through the pages of everything you've been working on so far, whether those are physical pages or pages in your brain and mind, and take notes on what changes you can make moving forward that might get you more success. But I also need to say, don't be afraid to hear no. Because yes, rejection can be a 4-letter word, and it can be awful. But if you're going to have any kind of success in life, rejections, well, it's just part of the game you're going to have to get used to. It's like a bug bite or ripping off a bandage. It stings for a minute, but you can quickly move on. If you are too afraid of no to try, well, you're giving yourself a red light before you even have a chance to start. So now, I'm going to give you what may be the best tip I can ever give you on how to stay relentless and keep from giving up. In fact, as I said earlier, this advice will work really well in most of life's scenarios, and it's super simple. So listen up. Here it is. Create your own why list. No one can be as convincing and motivating to you as your own voice can. You know all your innermost secrets, motives, reasons, from the deepest to the most shallow, from the selfless to the most selfish, from one vision of your dream to the next. No one knows it better than you. So start a list of your why and add to it whenever a new thought comes to you. For example, a few things on my own why list are creating a legacy for my son that inspires him to pursue his dreams, dictating my own schedule, damn right, inspiring a movement for people to boldly do what they dream, and being able to say that I am an independent woman, an entrepreneur. What a great list, right? I mean, it's hard for me not to look at that and not feel super motivated to keep going. When you start to feel tired, unmotivated, or discouraged, turn to that list. Read your own words. Then thank your past self for the best motivation you've ever received. And now let's take it to the learning curve.
Welcome to the learning curve.
All right, so today's topic was all about being relentless. I fleshed it out for you, but let me just bullet point for you real quick what I already said. So, number 1, what to do. Do something every day, that will move your dream forward. Stay productive, don't burn yourself out, but decide every day to do something. And Also, always keep coming up with fresh new ideas for delivering your product or service. Think very broadly and outside the box. And don't hesitate to look at what your competition is doing to find a new idea for yourself to use. Number 2, what not to do. Don't go back to the same well with the same pitch, offer, or approach and expect anything other than another no. Don't waste your time doing that. Either come up with a new way to pitch an idea to someone or move on. And take the time to learn from every no you do get. Examine what may have gone wrong and what you may have done wrong and what you can change to have more chance at a successful pitch next time. Number 3, don't be afraid to hear no. Fear of rejection can be the most stifling of obstacles and have a complete chilling effect on your career. Don't let it happen. Let the no's fly by fast if you have to, but don't let them stop you. And number 4, of course, creating your own why list is my big tip of the day. No one can better remind you of all the reasons why you are super passionate about your thing in the most discouraging of times than you. So start a list and include every single reason you can think of, from the biggest to the smallest and most seemingly insignificant. You never know which will be the spark that reignites you when you need it the most. And that is today's learning curve. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Curve the Cube podcast, where dreamers become doers. My passion behind this project is to provide people who want to go from being dreamers to being doers tips for free on how to be a curvist and get it done. I know how expensive pursuing your dream can be. I know that, especially in the beginning, you seem to need to reinvest every dime made back into your project. Let the podcast, The Learning Curve, and Dreamers Become Doers on Facebook be your cheap and easy route to support. Whether you have very little budget to put toward your dream right now and can't afford a professional consultant, or are more risk averse and are just dipping a toe in the water of following your dream, or just plain want as much great info for free as possible, you are why I'm doing this podcast. But I'd like you to consider your stance on that little word, free. Because though this podcast does have sponsors, and I appreciate and love them very much, they do not cover the full cost of production. And I also really want to upgrade my equipment so I can keep making this show grow and become even better for you. So, what would you be able to contribute to my cause? Any amount helps. Please go to patreon.com/curvethecube, that's Patreon, patreon.com/curvethecube, and consider donating even just $1. It would make a huge difference. Other than that, thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you all over the interwebs and social medias. And this is Jemmy signing off. Curve those cubes.
You have successfully curved the cube.